Nayoon activates the emergency pager to call her brother. She tries to stall the villain as much as she can to buy some time. However, the villain attacks and injures the girl beside Nayoon. Just as he was about to attack Kin, Cassian arrives at the scene and defends her. He attacks the villain, but it had no effect, and the villain counterattacks. A fierce fight is now about to unfold. Or is it? The villain figured out that Cassian is the one who had defeated Blaster and has now come for him. He withdraws from the fight. It is seen that he says they will meet again one day. Cassian helps the injured girl, and she is now out of trouble. As Cassian makes his way back, he is intercepted by a drone. Following that, a familiar face shows up. It is the villain Crow. She gives Cassian more magic stones and claims that Bloodrain is a difficult opponent. The next day, it is seen as Cassian was leaving for school. Gangu's sister asks him to be careful with all the crime going on. Cassian realizes that he needs to train and get stronger to take revenge on Lampus. Not only that, but he's also worried about his deal with the driver because Crow had threatened him not to upset the driver. He plans on investigating Siowa High School from where the girls from last night were. At the hospital, Uchon gets more and more curious as to who is the villain that saved her sister. Meanwhile, Cassian goes to a store to buy a drink. The cashier at the store looks suspicious. As the cashier moves, he bumps into Cassian. Moros is shocked. Turns out, the cashier is a villain. Cassian identifies him as Bloodrain by the book he was reading on the counter. They try to follow him, but he gets away. Cassian consumes the magic stones and unlocks more abilities. His magic power now reaches 470. He also identifies a few skills of Bloodrain. Meanwhile, it is seen that the villain is now planning his next murders at a hospital using hypnosis and mind control. Next, we see the doctors who are under the hypnosis of the villain, tricking Nayoon. Just when she comes to the hospital gate, the villain shows up. Luckily, Cassian had put a tracker on the villain, and he shows up at the hospital quickly using his two new abilities. A fight now unfolds. Cassian kicks the villain, sending him flying. He dodges his attacks and fights hard. Bloodrain uses hypnosis on him, but Cassian counters and stabs him in the face. We can see that Cassian has the upper hand in the fight. He overpowers Bloodrain and is almost about to finish him. Just then, he transforms into blood form and escapes. The hypnotized staff come back to their senses, and Cassian asks them to take the patients in a safe place. He rushes out, trying to find the villain, but his paths cross with Daewon and Uchon. A small fight starts, as Cassian is seen as a villain. Daewon injures Cassian, but Uchon spaces out as he remembered this guy saved his sister. Luckily, Cassian escapes. Meanwhile, Bloodrain is shown to be thirsty for blood and injured. Next, we see the bloodthirsty villain head to Club Red Juice. He wreaks havoc there as he starts drinking the blood of people. Meanwhile, Uchon meets his sister and she explains how the same villain saved her again. They then rush towards the club. Cassian's wound is now healed and he receives a new message. At the club, Daewon and Uchon reach to see Bloodrain drinking blood and healing himself. The villain attacks them and another fight unfolds. In order to protect the survivors, Uchon can't use his flare techniques. This costs Daewon and he is badly injured. Next, we see Uchon fighting the villain, but he gets badly injured. The villain gave him a chance to change locations to fight freely. Uchon was also provoked by the villain as he threatened to hurt his sister. As they now fight in a different area, Uchon uses his full strength, but it was no use. The villain was also holding back before, and now Uchon is caught. Meanwhile, Cassian finds Daewon's sword. He extracts the magic stones from it and consumes them to gain ultra-magic power. Uchon is getting the beating of his life. Just when the villain was about to finish him, Cassian shows up. The arrogant villain was confident he can beat Cassian once and for all now, as he had awakened his true powers, consuming human blood. He strikes Cassian, however, he gets completely overpowered by the newly awakened Cassian. The villain tries to change his physical form again, but Cassian uses shadow binding to hold him. He then uses his newly unlocked skill, Shadow Flare. He is now at 520 magic points. In the aftermath of the fight, the media spread the news that Uchon defeated Bloodrain. However, Uchon tells Daewon that the villain who saved his sister was the one who defeated him. He also mentioned that he was a dual ability wielder. Cassian decided to go to the villains in the Ville Zone. Meanwhile, the driver is visited by a villain called Royal Garnet, who was also observing Cassian's fight. He asks the driver if he already knew Cassian was a dual wielder. Driver mentions he did think Cassian was different, but not a dual wielder. Next, we see Cassian visiting Driver at the Ville Zone. They go to a pub where Driver provides him with the magic stones. The driver is amazedly analyzing Cassian because of how much increase in magical power he has had. Cassian asks Driver the source of the stones. It is the owner of the pub, Cheha. He is also an outer. It is explained an outer is someone who is a psyker but works independently. After listening to various perks of becoming a part of the Ville Zone and a boss, Cassian is interested in it. Meanwhile, Black Hands plans on taking revenge on Cassian in the Ville Zone. Next, after a small tour of the Ville Zone, Driver offers Cassian to join the Ville Zone. He says there is a mole amongst them, and he needs to weed him out. He also says that he swears by his name as a villain he wants him in Ville Zone. Meanwhile, Yuri is seen getting an invitation from headquarters in the States for training. She is happy, but is also worried about Gangu. Meanwhile, at the Ville Zone, Black Hands was about to gang up on Cassian, but a villain named Duak and Crow stop him. The next day, Cassian trains using weights and sprints around building stamina. He claims he has to get stronger to fight groups of villains at once. Not only that, he has to be ready for the test at the Ville Zone and also take his revenge on the Lampus. He then comes home to take a shower. He reads the letter invitation of his sister to HQ. He assures her that she should go and that he can take care of himself. Meanwhile, Black Hands is seen desperately waiting for his revenge. Back at home, Yuri is worried if she should go or not. In this dilemma, she gets drunk with a bunch of friends. Cassian takes care of her. The next day, we see they are at the airport. Cassian sees off his sister and wishes her well. Now then, it is finally time for the Ville Zone entry test. Cassian is up against Duak, a ferocious fighter, as everyone claimed. The battle begins and Cassian ended it in one blow to the neck. He calls out the next opponent. Just when everyone is shocked by Duak's defeat, Red Eye challenges Cassian to a duel. Meanwhile, a traitor is shown talking to their boss and saying the Ville Zone would be destroyed soon. The fight between them unfolds. After a flashy battle, just before Cassian could strike, Red Eye admitted defeat. Cassian says he is such a bore. Just then, Red Eye gives him a desire suppression patch as everyone in Ville Zone uses it. Towards the end, we see Blackhand and Duak along with other villains join hands against Cassian as they don't want him to become their next boss.
What happens next? Till then, subscribe.